She thought breaking into my house would give her the upper hand, but she had no idea what was waiting for her on the other side of that door. This wasn't just another HOA fine or a petty argument about lawn care. This was a line no one expected her to cross. While she prowled through my living room, convinced she could control everything in this neighborhood, she forgot one terrifying detail. My K9 doesn't take kindly to trespassers. What drove her to make such a reckless move? And how far would the HOA go to cover up her mistake? Keep watching, because this story is about to expose just how dangerous petty power can become. Before everything spiraled out of control, life in the neighborhood felt calm, even ordinary. The homeowner, a hard-working professional who had saved for years to finally buy a place of peace, believed moving into this community would mean safety, stability, and a sense of belonging. The houses were neatly lined up, the lawns trimmed just right, and neighbors waved as they passed by. On the surface, it looked like the perfect suburban dream. But just beneath that polished exterior, the HOA's presence loomed large. From the very first week, small reminders of control were impossible to ignore. Newsletters stuffed with friendly reminders, warning letters taped to front doors, and neighbors whispering about who had been fined this month. At first, these rules seemed like harmless efforts to keep order, the kind of thing most people could overlook. But there was one board member who stood out, a woman known for her constant surveillance of others. She patrolled the streets with a clipboard in hand, peeking over fences and taking pictures of the smallest infractions. People in the neighborhood called her Karen behind her back, but no one dared to confront her. For the homeowner, these early encounters were easy enough to dismiss, even laugh off, until the notices started coming directly to their mailbox. They were always worded in the same cold, accusatory tone, hinting that even the most private corners of their life weren't really theirs. Something about it felt unsettling, invasive, and impossible to shake. It was the kind of tension that creeps up slowly, so quietly you almost convince yourself it isn't there. But the homeowner had no idea that what began as an irritating set of rules would soon evolve into a terrifying violation, one that crossed every imaginable boundary. And once that line was crossed, there would be no going back. The first letter was annoying but forgettable, a neatly folded slip tucked into the mailbox, with a sharp reminder about improper trash placement. The homeowner remembered standing in the driveway, shaking their head at the absurdity of it. The bins had been set out the night before, not a moment earlier. Still, the HOA claimed it was a violation. At first, they shrugged it off, tossed the paper aside, and told themselves it was just part of living in a managed community. But the letters didn't stop. Week by week, they multiplied. One accused them of leaving the grass a half-inch too long, another about a flower pot supposedly clashing with community colors, and even one that claimed the homeowner's car looked too dirty to be parked in the driveway. Each violation came with a fine attached, not small amounts either, but hundreds of dollars that seemed to materialize out of nowhere. It didn't take long before the cheerful promise of suburban peace began to feel more like a prison sentence, with Karen watching every move from her perch at the end of the street. The harassment became relentless. Neighbors whispered warnings, telling the homeowner to just comply and keep their head down. Others admitted they, too, had been targets, but chose to pay the fines rather than risk more trouble. Karen thrived on this fear. She strutted through the neighborhood with a smug grin, clipboard in hand, as if she were judge, jury, and executioner of community life. The homeowner began to notice her patterns, the way she circled their property more than anyone else's, the way her car slowed every time she passed their driveway, the way her phone angled suspiciously whenever they stepped outside. Privacy no longer existed. The home they had worked so hard to buy now felt like a stage, every action scrutinized and recorded by an unblinking eye. One evening, the homeowner returned from work to find something chilling. A letter slipped under the front door, harsher than anything before. It wasn't just about trash bins or paint colors. This time, it accused them of being a disruptive influence in the community. The vague wording felt intentional, a weapon designed to intimidate. And at the bottom was a warning. Continued noncompliance could result in legal action or even foreclosure proceedings. The threat was clear: comply or risk losing everything. The homeowner's frustration boiled into anger. How could something as trivial as lawn care or a flower pot possibly justify stealing a home? But the HOA, and Karen in particular, operated with a frightening mix of arrogance and authority. Determined not to be bullied, the homeowner started documenting everything. But for every defense the homeowner built, Karen seemed to escalate further. The break-in was the last straw, but it wasn't the end. It was the beginning of the storm that would shake the entire neighborhood. The homeowner, trembling with fury, yet steady with resolve, gathered the evidence. Photos of the ransacked living room, scratches on the door where the lock had been forced, and most importantly, the audio from the security system. Every chilling second of Karen's intrusion was caught, her footsteps echoing through the hallway, her muttered words about checking compliance, and then the sharp growl of the K9 as she realized she wasn't alone. The sound was undeniable proof. She had no right to be there. Armed with this evidence, the homeowner refused to stay silent. They filed a police report, handed over every recording and photograph, and for the first time, the power shifted. Still, the HOA tried to protect her. At the next community meeting, the board sat stiffly at the long wooden table, their faces pale and tight-lipped. Neighbors filled the seats, buzzing with whispers of what they'd heard. The homeowner walked in with calm determination, clutching a small flash drive like it was a weapon. And when the audio played, the room gasped. Karen's mask of authority shattered. The room erupted. Neighbors who had once stayed quiet out of fear found their voices. Stories spilled out, tales of fines for imaginary violations, threats of foreclosure, even harassment late at night. The meeting devolved into chaos, but no one cared. Years of frustration had ignited into a wildfire that couldn't be contained. The police investigation moved quickly. Karen was charged, and the HOA board collapsed under the weight of its complicity. The climax wasn't just Karen's downfall. It was the moment the community snapped free of the grip that had suffocated them for years. The dust from the chaos began to settle, but the echoes of Karen's downfall lingered in every corner of the neighborhood. The homeowner, once powerless, now walked the streets with quiet confidence. Neighbors waved more freely. Families painted shutters in colors they liked, and children played without fear. The scars of the ordeal remained, but they carried meaning, a reminder of resilience and the power of unity. And as the homeowners sat on their porch at sunset, wrecks resting loyally at their feet, one thought lingered. Sometimes, it only takes one act of courage to bring down years of oppression.